Years ago, this would be a parody, and that's all it would be. You would just laugh your ass off at the idea of swapping these two characters. And you look around and you go, oh, is this what Clown World is like? Yeah, that's one of it. So click links, join the channel here on YouTube, kind of while you can, or over subscribe to the various other links. Check out the Odyssey and all the other channels. I got a mailbox too if you want to mail me something. Send me email. So Steve Yan to portray a race swap version of the Sentry in Marvel's Thunderbolts plus some gardening extremism. So what happened? Yeah, this is a spitting image of the original character. Oh looks just like him. Asian is replacing the European character because I guess it's too on the nose to keep with the African theme, so they switched to South Korea. Disney is not going to give you the blonde Nordic god type of character because that makes blonde European types look vaguely good, and Disney hates that. It really is that simple. They just hate you with an incandescent genocidal hatred I can't fully express on YouTube. You go check out the old verified hate or blue check mark hate that ran, like over 5 years ago now to get an idea of what these people think of you. What do you mean these people? Disney seems, I meant the blue check marks, of course, pretty keen on making mediocre films. If you're too young to remember, Disney used to be a huge part of a family life back in the 80s and 90s. The Disney now is unrecognizable from the 90s and before. It's adapting with the times, you bigot. No, these billion-dollar Peppo pushing globalist companies are not adapting to the times. They're making the times. They're making the narrative. They're doing things that people are not on board with. Things that do not advance their financial interests or increase their investor shareholder return on investment. They're doing things despite it costing them money or costing the shareholders money. They're not moving with the times. They are making the narrative, even if it costs them money. This is not some business articles of incorporation like the way you think of you open up a widget, you're selling widgets. This is a religion. It's a religion. It's like nature pours a vacuum, and they destroyed one religion, and they replaced it with Moses Mordecai Levy. So these they're pushing this narrative, like they're reshaping the world in their own image, and it's like it looks pretty satanic. Well, yeah, you're getting close. So don't put the cart before the horse. These are not companies reacting and selling what people want. These are parasitical globalist engines of change designed to bring the light of Lucifer and create a hell on earth. Does that sound as hyperbolic as it would have 20 years ago, 40 years ago? Like, it doesn't. You just got to look. I mean, you can look at some of the things you're doing, like, oh, are we in hell? Are we in hell? Because this is right next door to hell. If you told us Disney would be pushing BLT men raising a kid together 30 years ago, like in the Eternals, we would have been pretty confused at a country that was sleepwalking its way into Sodom and Gomorrah. But that's what's happening, and fat people don't revolt, and America is very well fed. Am I saying the revolution starts with Disney? If you pay for things, you get more of them. Imagine your militia has an anti-rat symbol, and World War III, Civil War kicks off, and then that kicks off into World War III, and the symbolism of destroying the Disney rat makes it into the history books, and that has to go down in history of, I guess you call it the Clown Wars. So I was reading this Mary Sue article, and it was about HBO, and it's got new pricing tiers, and they were just going through each one and explaining it. It's like, kind of feels like this is an advertisement for Warner Brothers, Mary Sue. Gosh, who owns Mary Sue? What do you mean? It's not a bunch of chicks in their living room? No. That's Mary Sue. No, is owned by a corporation. It was founded by the Abrams Corporation, and then it was sold to some other New York group. Anyway, so they're going through the pricing tiers of HBO and HBO Max, and I started to think about the change in the left wing from today, and even a few decades ago, back when you were in high school. Nowadays, there doesn't seem to be a left-wing, anti-global corporate wing like there used to be back in the 90s and even just 20 years ago, because that's all a far-right-wing dog whistle. Because the media is pushing a globalist narrative, the hippy-dippy left-wing is completely gone. I remember the left-wing in the 90s was a lot of fun. They were going down the path of environmentalism. And then this version of the environmental movement is fascinating. It's a video I'll do for Odyssey and BitChute. because you can't talk about it on YouTube. It's like, I thought you guys were supporting low birth rate. Oh, not so much. Not so much. What happened to that, Sierra Club? What happened to that, all these environmental movements? No, 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 actually, we support high birth rate, high carbon footprint people now. What? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, you're right. That doesn't make any sense, but that's where we're going with it. The Watching the subversion of the left wing over the past 30 years has just been fan friggin' tastic. Anyway, so yeah, everything is of course is going to be a canine whistle now. So the left wing protects billion-dollar businesses now. It is just pathetic to see how far the left wing has fallen. And hey, don't get me wrong, if you want to make fun of the neocons, go for it. It's like it's just wings of the same bird until you get off the bird entirely. The subversion and corruption of the left is complete. They will gladly defend Amazon and Netflix from the Hugo Boss critics who are rejecting the mental soy slop of these billion-dollar companies is putting out. Again, those are far right-wing values to reject propaganda, which would have been a left-wing value 10 to 20 years ago. Now the left wing doesn't actually have any values other than eating themselves into an early grave and glorifying mental illnesses so they can secure themselves a place on the imagined Marxist oppression hierarchy. That's what most of this nonsense is about. All this anti-white hatred from these media parasites is forcing kids to put themselves on the oppression ladder in any way they can. They'd be better off just rejecting the degeneracy and joining a right-wing hiking and extremist gardening club. Once you understand that Hollywood and the media are vermin and everything they say is cultural Bolshevism, everything makes sense. We are awesome. We've always been awesome. They are the problem. The people who reject the Hollywood parasites and are forming communities where they talk about gardening and make memes to portray the left correctly as soy jacks, these modern hippy dippies are right wing because they're rejecting Pravda. The far right wing Hugo Boss now are the ones who are rejecting the mainstream Hollywood degeneracy, and they're smoking weed and going camping and hiking and gardening and canning and prepping and all those extremist right wing values now. It's like kind of was the left wing values for a long time. What happened? Oh, now the left wing is a globalist left wing. They want you dependent on the state as much as possible. But because the left is in a position where they can't reject Hollywood because it's pushing tribe mixing, global homogenization, anti-white, anti-Christian, globalist values. Hollywood is such open propaganda that to reject it does mean that you're probably a right-wing type, or at least the straw man tilting at windmills version of everything to them is if you reject any little thing, you go, oh, you must be Hugo Boss. Like, those were like mainstream values 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You're saying your parents and your grandparents are all Hugo Boss. Even your great grandparents or grandparents who were literally fighting the Japanese are all suddenly like none of your argument makes sense. It's like you realize if you looked at the values of your grandfather, it's like you saw what they would support. It's like, I mean, if in 1940, 45, if they knew what they were in for 20 years later, it's like they never would have got off the boats. They would have turned on their political commissars and just deleted them and went back home. Anyway, because anyone who wants a clean, quiet, safe neighborhood without crime is obviously a far right wing type. So what happened? Yes, of course, they can't have a blonde Nordic god. Disney hates anything European, and the top of their hierarchy is going to be blonde or red hair. The whitest of the white. Yes, every group has their own internal hierarchy, even if it's not malicious. There's like always going to be a loose something. It's not, but it's not like it's not malicious. It's not malicious in every case. It's just yeah, things that are rare are going to be more valued, and it's like you just accept that. It's like it's not you're not bitter about it if you've got hazel eyes or brown hair or something. I mean, I can't imagine having it. God, that would be so disappointing. But I'm sure those people aren't bitter about it. It's just like you recognize that blonde hair and blue eyes or red hair and green eyes or something like that's rare. It's like when you combine that with people who are strikingly good looking. It's like yeah, that's a rare thing. It's okay to hold that up as rare. And these parasites look at that and go, oh no, we can't do that because those are all European people. It's like, yeah, you can. Well, we'll have to do that. We'll have to elevate those people. Anyway, the Sentry is the Marvel Superman character, which, I mean, they have Thor and they've got other characters. But the thing is, comics is about throwing ideas against the wall and characters against the wall and seeing what sticks. And then characters come with their own, not sub-universe in the physical sense, but in the storytelling sense. It comes with a new cast of characters and then offshoot comics. And then back in the day of paper comics, that was one thing. But in the 70s and 80s, people started to get the idea like, oh, you could turn these into movies. And if you own IPs that need to be turned into movies, the amount of money that flows from those movies is orders of magnitude higher from comics. Even back in the, I don't know, 70s, 80s, very well successful comics, like nothing compares to the money that comes into movies, especially nowadays. I mean, comics are so low selling nowadays, and you look at movies, and it's just like it. That's why people are so desperate in the comic industry or any kind of publishing industry to get something to do. Netflix is like a good, those kind of like streaming shows are good entry level shows, or like, what was it, Mags Saju and the Vagrant Queen? It's like, that's it. You're trying to get your foot in the door with that. But it's, I mean, people are looking to, if I get a character that's in like a mainstream $100 million plus movie, the residuals for those are just, it's a long gamble, but the payoff is huge. And in the meantime, it's like you're making fun characters that you enjoy making. Anyway, the thing with throwing ideas against the wall is most ideas are going to be pretty bad. But no, globalist anti-white Disney is not going to have some long blonde-haired Aryan hero out of Austrian central casting. Because as I said yesterday, he would sell. Because blonde Nordic types are awesome. They're rare, they're good looking. Rare, beautiful people are going to be big sellers. That's just the way of the world. So part of the humiliation ritual of a conquered people is to destroy their icons, tear down statues, burn the museums, burn the classic books, or in the case of modern books, they're editing those books. What happened to not one word is changed or omitted? We're globalist parasites, and this is cultural Marxism, so get on board with it. Even something as silly as a stupid comic book, it's like they will change that. Anything you enjoy, they'll destroy. And as much as I like comic books, as an adult, I can realize how stupid most of them are. Where, for a contrast, you want to go read some John Delarose, Mike Miller, Vox Day, Chuck Dixon type of comics. There's like a different perspective on comics when it's coming from a more nationalist perspective versus comics that are coming from a globalist perspective. But I will say, like back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even the 70s, there were comics that were good, solid, tribal comics. And then after that, they just got, at least in the mainstream, they just went full globalist because they were made by people who were far leftists. It's just as the culture went further and further left, the companies also went way, way further left. And as a consequence, what happened to comics? Well, they don't sell anymore. Like that's the way of the world. Also, I mean, they're still there as IP farms to maintain the rights to the comics. They try to sell them to try to make them into movies, but that's about it. Like otherwise, you look at these comics, you're like, so these, like, a good selling comic is selling 50,000 copies. That doesn't seem like, the country is like a third of a billion people, and you're selling like 50,000 copies is a solid. That's weird. Did they used to sell more than that? Like, yeah, they used to sell a whole lot more than that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. A very sincere thank you to everyone who, some people have done some things over at Subscribestar. Thank you for that, and I will see you guys all next episode.